Well, back to chapter 16. Now number 6 is coming out of the temple, pouring his bowl on the Euphrates. It dries up, and all of a sudden, they out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, so out of Satan's mouth, out of the Antichrist mouth, and out of the false prophet's mouth, are spirits of demons performing signs. And they go all over the world to the kings of the world and gather them together to the battle of the great day of God Almighty. And the place is called in Hebrew, Har Hilav Megiddo. So the plain of Esdraelon has a hill called Har Megiddon. It's a perfect triangle-shaped battlefield, and God is summoning through those demons, because of the 6th bowl, all these armies to come. And they come. Why is that? Because God has already staked his name on Israel. In Hosea, he calls Jerusalem my city. And in Jeremiah 31, he said he will gather all these people to fight against him. It's the finale of the world, Armageddon is. God gathers them to fight. He describes it. By the way, Zechariah 12 and 14 is unbelievable. It says that all these armies come, they're gathered around, and as the Lord returns, do you remember what happens? It's really gross. But the Bible says it, so I'll repeat it. Their eyes, all these soldiers coming to fight against God, see the returning Christ, look up at him, and they don't have their eclipse glasses on, and their eyes melt in their sockets. And it says their tongues melt, dissolve in their mouths, and they die. That's why I said it's a little anticlimactic. There's not a shot fired. Jesus returns and melts all those enemies. Jerusalem, during the tribulation period, is the focus of all the nations on earth. Did you know I always think about poor Zechariah? Zechariah is writing in the 6th century BC about Jerusalem. Church history or Jewish tradition tells us that he actually lived and walked around Jerusalem. What did Jerusalem look like in the 6th century? After the Babylonian captivity, destruction, it looked like a whole bunch of burned, blackened, tumbled rocks. There are a few people living here and there. And he said that the Lord will go forth and fight against those nations when he fights against in the day of battle, and his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which is in front of Jerusalem, and all the nations of the earth are going to be coming there. And he must have thought, why would any nation of the earth come here? There's nothing here. It's all broken down. But see, God knew what's coming. Israel is the focus of every news center. Everybody's covering Jerusalem. I mean, there are news bureaus where they have reporters and people that are taking pictures. And Washington, D.C. is important, New York's important, Moscow's important, you know what I mean, Beijing is important. But boy, for its size, Jerusalem is unbelievable. Everybody wants to know what's going on there. Why? Because God says, these are my people. By the way, God says that in the 6th century BC, and he says it at the end of human history, and so they're still his people. They were 2,600 years ago. They will be at 7 years from now at the second coming of Christ, 7+ years from now, because we don't know when he's returning in the second coming. And Jerusalem is not only always the Jewish people are my people, but the city is always my city. Well, what does Armageddon look like? Real quickly, Daniel 11 kind of fills in the pieces that Revelation 16, where we are right now, and 19 is Jesus coming down to Armageddon. 16 is all of them coming to Armageddon. Daniel 11 is where they come from. It says the kings of the north come, the kings of the east come, the kings of the south come, and the Antichrist comes from the west. That's why we always say that the Antichrist is leading the revived Roman Empire, because that was always west. See, the Roman Empire was here, and they were struggling with Parthia, and they had this, and they had the fringe of the Black Sea, but it was always west of Israel. So the revived Roman Empire comes, the kings of the south, kings of the east, kings of the north. But let's think a little bit about charts, okay? Here's a great chart. This is You've already had Daniel, or you'll have Daniel. This is Daniel, 70 weeks. 69 weeks, an interval. During the interval, Daniel says Jesus is crucified, Jerusalem's temple is destroyed. Then after an indeterminate amount of time, the final 7 years, the final week, by the way, it doesn't say in Daniel week, it says heptad. Heptad is a group of 7. So there are 69 groups of 7, and then there's one group of 7. And Daniel tells us in the middle of the one group of 7, there's going to be this covenant enforced and then broken, and at the middle, the abomination of desolation is set up, and that launches, the whole period is called the tribulation, but that middle point launches the great tribulation. You all know this. The second coming is the yellow. This is for sure. That's the red, is the Battle of Armageddon. We've been talking about it. It's chapter 16, chapter 19, Zechariah 12, Zechariah 14. We know the temple's rebuilt. We covered that all yesterday. And here's the rapture. This is before the launching of the Antichrist reign. But look at this. What is this? Oh, that's Ezekiel 38, 39. When is that going to happen? That's a good question. When is that going to happen? Is Ezekiel 38 the Battle of Armageddon? Well, that's interesting. In the Battle of Armageddon, everyone comes. East, west, north, south. In Ezekiel 38 and 39, very specific countries come. So, here we go. World War III is what most people think Armageddon is. I would be cautious about that. It appears there are 2 battles. It appears there's a battle at the front end of the tribulation, and we know for sure there's a finale, Armageddon. World War III may not be what we're reading about in Revelation 16 that I just read to you, because there's a war in Psalm 83, there's a war in Ezekiel 38 and 39, and then we have this Daniel 11 and Revelation 16 and also Revelation 19. So what's the difference between them? Well, let's just look at headlines. You all know this. Iran has been bucking all the UN and US and everybody else, nuclear inspectors, and have been quietly making enriched uranium. They either already have it or they're like within a week or 2 of having enough fissile material to assemble an atomic bomb. And you say, how could they do that? Well, remember, the Pakistanis have had an atomic bomb, for decades. And there are many poor Pakistanis that can go anywhere. The Chinese have had atomic knowledge. And there are many poor Chinese that would defect and take their knowledge with them. The Russians, you understand what I mean? There is a lot of knowledge about how to make atomic bombs out there. The French gave their resources for Israel to make theirs in the 50s. So, there's no doubt Iran will probably get their atomic bomb. So the headline says, the strikes needed to defeat Iran's capabilities would require a coordination with the United States. U.S.-Israeli relations have deteriorated, but since Netanyahu returned to power, the Biden administration would not allow the U.S. Air Force to help Israel. Do you know what a conflagration would start if Israel attacks Iran? Well, guess what? I didn't have time. While I was typing these words on this half of the slide, a headline came through both Bloomberg and the New York Times. Those are both very reputable places. And what they said is the U.S. expects Iran to fire a volley of missiles and drones at Israel within the next week. Not Houthis, not Hezbollah, not Hamas, Iran. Israel instantly got on, did a newscast this morning. And they said, if one missile comes from the territory of Iran, we will go in and destroy their atomic facility. Now remember, the Israelis invented the neutron bomb. Did you know that? The Israelis invented the neutron bomb. Do you know what the neutron bomb is? It's an amazing bomb that doesn't destroy buildings. If they hit the Word of Life campus with a neutron bomb, it would just devastate every living thing. The fish would die, the trees would die, all the grass would die, all of us would die, and the buildings would all still be here. It's a great invention, so you don't have to clean up. And also, the neutrons would dissipate. It's a little different than the plutonium and U-238 and all the stuff, cesium and everything that comes out. All I'm saying is, we're living in unusual times. What does Psalm 83 say? That's a different war. In Psalm 83, it describes the Moab, the Hagarenes, Gebal, Ammon, Amalek, Philistia, Tyre, and Assyria. And we read that, we go, that's really interesting. But those people did not all simultaneously ever were they in power attacking or threatening Israel. Never. They're from a very vast timeline of people. I mean, you know all these from the Bible. I mean, the Philistines, the people of Tyre, they were helping build the temple. The Assyrians, but look who they are now. The people that used to live in Moab are now inhabited by the Palestinians and the Central Jordanians, the Hagarenes. Where was Hagar from? The Egyptians. Hezbollah is Gebal and northern Lebanon. Ammon is the Palestinians and northern Jordanians. Amalek are all the Arabs of the Sinai area. Hamas of the Gaza Strip is Philistia. They even call themselves Palestinians, which is after Philistia, the Philistines. Tyre is Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, and Assyria are the Syrians and northern Iraqis. Did you know it's very possible that the Ezekiel 38 war is not Armageddon? What happens, by the way, in the Ezekiel 38 war? It says they come from the north, the Scythians, which are the ancestral inhabitants of what we call Russia today, and all of the hordes of that, which would be all Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan. Iran is named by name. Northern Africa is named, and Ethiopia and Sudan are named. The Houthis are being armed by Sudan and Iran, and this is all shaping up. This war might happen anytime soon. What happens in that war? Well, it's very interesting. We have a NATO member that's in that group. And Turkey has now aligned with Iran against Israel, and that's a NATO member. That's a member of the Western European group. But the bottom line is the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war is when all of Russia's sphere of influence, this is from Bloomberg, by the way, the news service, Russia is right now behind Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, and the U.S. has the support of Bahrain, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, of course, Israel. It's really, you add Turkey in there, and you add, Sudan. It's just unbelievable how close, without knowing the Bible, the news services are getting. And basically what happens is, and this is, by the way, a commentator, I took this out of their commentary, who believes Ezekiel 38 is Armageddon. But basically they say Magog is southern Russia, Gomer Togarmah is Turkey, Syria, Persia, of course, is Iran, Libya is Libya, and Ethiopia is Ethiopia. And they will attack Israel. This is not the Antichrist. This is not Armageddon. This is not the final war. But when that happens, Israel, by the way, defeats them. But in the defeat, it's kind of like Gladiator, if you've ever seen Ridley Scott's movie. Do you remember Russell Crowe beats the bad guy, but then what does he do? He goes, that's what happens to Israel. In Ezekiel 38 and 39, they defeat the armies, but it devastates them, so they are like dying, weak. And that's when the Antichrist rises. And this is so interesting. We're seeing the kings of the East helping Russia in the Ukrainian war. Putin would not be making it without Xi. The kings of the East are helping the kings of the North. I'll get more on that when we get to chapter 19.